I would now like to open the floor for discussion. Please raise your hands. Okay, let me give the floor to Justice, sorry, I can't read your name from here. Justice Nambuye.
Thank you very much. May I take this opportunity to laud my sisters who have presented. And my reaction is to Botswana, our sisters from Botswana. There are those two case scenarios that we were given. One where the trafficker, I think, caused the victim to sneak from the safe house and now is a father of two. My own view is he is a criminal, took advantage of a vulnerable victim. The children are also victims. He has to face the law, and I'm sure the state of Botswana has at its disposal ways and means of taking care of the victim mother and the victim children. So he deserves no mercy. He has to face the law. Now, the second scenario of a child trafficked and now is in a comfort zone, and the law requires him to be taken back to the bare ground. The child needs to be taken through counseling, and both parents to be taken through counseling. In the receiving family, if they are willing, you can explore the foster laws so that they foster the child up to the age of majority, and this other, the natural parent, let him accept a child. When the child grows up, definitely the child will go searching for the roots. Bring the two families together to accept one another like brothers and sisters, the African way. For the sake of this child, the child needs education and needs to come to terms to what has happened. And for my sister in South Africa, we have read in the papers of what has been going on. And now as judicial officers, we can't shout from the judgment seat. But there are ways whereby we can engage the government. It has to come up with a policy document, state exactly which way is it going. South Africa on the African continent is a giant. We benefit greatly from rich jurisprudence on human rights, and surely we cannot let this on human trafficking to go down the bridge and say we stitch our mouth. No, we have a way of talking without going into the streets to shout. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Judge Kabuma, please.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. My question is to Sierra Leone. You spoke about Village Parent Group 58, Village Parent Group operations. I wanted to know how, are they an initiative of the judiciary? Is it an international organization that has been localized? I'm asking this so that we can also borrow as Kenyans because we are here to learn. My other question was to South Africa, as the learned judge has mentioned. We have read what has happened in the papers, and how do you prevent as a country people who are trafficked victims from xenophobia? Because they might get caught up at the safe houses within those locations. Or what is South Africa doing to ensure that the victims are actually secure? Thank you.
Do you want to reply first, and then we go on to the next question from South Africa?
Ma'am, I just need to emphasize that our TIP Act is very comprehensive. It also talks about the services that has to be provided to the victims of human trafficking. And on that, there are structures that are dealing with those aspects. But as you know, that with all structures, sometimes there might be challenges also, social development that has to deal with victims of both people coming from xenophobia and also TIP victims. The responsibilities that social development has to look after. We do have safe houses. How safe they are, it's something else that we can talk about, but we do have that. And that is a problem that is also victims of TIP are experiencing. Because of the syndicates and all those things, the aspect of security is but one of the issues that hampers people from reporting this kind of crimes, because of they're not sure as to whether the places that they will be placed at are secured enough for those syndicates to infiltrate and all. And what also we need to take note of is that they are, one can argue and say that they are safe, but there are other aspects, factors that are playing into here. As you know, that not only South Africa has a problem with corruption, you know, the police also, there might be those also who are part of the syndicates and might disclose as to where the people are. But as it is, the structures for protection and all is available.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, Bishop Sanchez has finally arrived after his detour, his African detour this morning. Okay, so there was another question from Judge Onkwani or Judge Nyaji. Yes, you go that way and then in behind, yes.
Thank you so much for the presentations. My name is Christine Jagi from Kenya. When the Botswana team was presenting, I looked at your statute and it's more or less like ours also. But it's interesting to note on the issues of the sources of funds for the restitution of the victims. Maybe just to get a clarification, where do the sources come? Because I think you said it's from the ministry mostly, but do you have other sources of funds in looking at issues of proceeds of crime taken from these traffickers? And how do you manage those funds? And whether there's an advisory committee that is maybe looking at how those funds can be managed and disseminated to these victims of trafficking. Secondly is on the issue of whether there's an asset recovery unit within which can also be able to get assets of these traffickers. I think an interesting scenario from Nigeria last time was that if they find your houses where the victims were being hosted, through their unit, they take the house and they can be able to sell and the proceeds go into that fund. So maybe from Botswana, it's through the learning experiences we can share how you're able to manage this fund and what you do with the funds. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Helen Onkwani. I come from Kenya. And first, I want to thank Christiana. That was a good presentation, and it's something I think we need to emulate, because human trafficking, it's cross-border. And without us dealing with it in cross-border mindset, we are not going to actually eradicate it. And my question was now to Elmi, the doctor. It's on the US. Do you have laws, clear laws on organ donation? Because what is happening in Kenya is that most of the times we read it in the newspaper, and we don't have the laws. We don't have laws on organ donation and all that. You will be reading it in the papers that when a post-mortem was being conducted is when they discovered they didn't have a kidney. The dead did not have a kidney, they didn't have a heart. Where did it go to? So it's good to learn what happens exactly, whether you have laws dealing with it, and so that we can be able to learn from it and emulate. Thank you.
I think that's a big issue for many countries in Africa, and we've had a lot of discussion around this issue in clinical meetings. There are only a handful of countries who have got rules, and certainly in South Africa, it's not fixed in the legislation, but we have some guidelines. And we have a Chapter 8 Health Act, which is quite broad. That type of broad legislation with some more detailed guidelines are actually quite useful, because often things change with time. And if you have it fixed in legislation, it's very difficult to change legislation. But if you have a broad legislation and you've got guidelines, it's much easier to change guidelines. And I'm happy to share what we have from South Africa with you. I know that Tunisia has got some fairly well-developed rules as well, which is available, and they've also shared it in the past, I think, with Sudan and with Tanzania. So there are some examples which we could use if we want to move forward.
Judge Mogar, if you. Oh, yes, sure. Okay.
Let me react to the two questions from Christian. In Botswana, we have an office of the receiver. The duty of that office is to receive all proceeds of crime and in turn deposit them into the government's consolidated fund, from which now the Minister of Finance will make a budget for all government ministries, including the Ministry of Justice, Defense and Security, where at the office of the TIP falls, and an allocation is made to the TIP office. That is why my sister was talking about the trafficking in persons budget, fighting for the small piece of cake with other needy government issues. I hope that answers you.
Can I respond to the question from Jane? Yes. The villages are being set up by the World Hope International Organization. It's an international organization. It's not by the judiciary, no. No, not the government of Sierra Leone, no.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name's Agnes Morgor, and it's wonderful to be back at this summit, just to exchange and see where we've reached since last year. I just wanted to ask Vivian, Judge Vivian from Sierra Leone, about the act that you have on settlement of cases. This is very interesting to us because we have a serious problem in this area. We have cases that are brought on human trafficking or sexual offenses, gender-based violence, and you find that by the time they come to court, they are charged, and then in the end, the families go away and discuss and agree on payments for settlement of these cases. And we find that out of maybe 5 or 10 cases, 2/3, even half of these are eventually settled, and the prosecution then has to withdraw the cases. So you don't need to respond today, but it would be interesting to share this, this particular piece of legislation, because we could certainly learn something from it.
Yes, just to say that it's being deliberated on the Sexual Offences Bill of 2019, which will be passed into law very soon. Before, with the 2012 legislation, we have a provision like the ADR system inserted in it about families getting together and trying to see the way forward for these victims. But as you have rightly said, some of these cases don't even get into the prosecution stage because they are settled long before that time. On the community levels, they're settled with, of course, compensation being paid for the rights of the child and all of that. So they don't even get to the police where they're even investigated at all. Some of the cases are investigated, the perpetrator is charged to court, and then no evidence is being led because it has been settled again. It has been settled. The complainants will never come to. The magistrates would take several adjournments, and we are being informed that we shouldn't be keeping cases for long. Case management system, we should try and try and finish our cases as soon as possible. And they don't come after several adjournments. What happens? The matter is thrown out of court. The other scenario would be where the child is being moved from one place to the other for stigma purposes, and the child never comes to court again. She has been moved to some place and she doesn't even know about the matter anymore. She's forgotten about it and she's not there because the parents have settled the matter. But with this new legislation, which is being passed now, that practice has been decried upon, that you shouldn't be settling these matters, you shouldn't be negotiating them, and anybody who does it will have 10 years imprisonment and a fine to stop people from settling these matters. But I must hasten to say that it's still going on, and they're still settling these matters because of the parents. The parents just think that some financial compensation would do, and moving the child from where the child is to another place, the child will forget about the whole story, and life can go on without thinking about what has happened. Yes.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I just wanted to react to the presentation by Christiana on the role of IOM in her area. And for me, they seem to have done a very good job in involving the judiciary and using the judicial arm to address the issue of trafficking in persons. In Kenya, although we have an active IOM, which has been UNODC, UNODC, they work together, I think that's why I'm getting confused, who have been dealing with issues of training. We find that they have not been involving the judiciary as much as they should. They concentrate more on the prosecutors and more on the police and the immigration department, and yet the judiciary is the one which is at the end of the chain link, so that we find that their training is not as effective as it should be. The idea of having a liaison magistrate, you said it's a pilot, but so far it looks like it's a very effective idea because it is providing a very good working system, a very good link that the judiciary can use to be able to address these cases. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to give the floor to Blessing Okodian now, who has asked to speak, and then I will go back to the over there.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here, and I've gained a lot of things from the presentation so far. My question goes to the South Africa presenter. The question is, what measures as judges do you put in place to enhance the technical capacity of interpreters? Because the issue of interpreters is a problem that's also international with different judges, because I've heard a lot of victims of human trafficking because I work with victims. I heard a lot of them always say that the interpreters do not interpret for them very well. Then I believe that the judges should put a way to enhance a way where these interpreters can be trained. And this is the reason why I'm asking this question. Thank you. Then the second question goes to the Botswana presenter, Anna. You talk about the compensation of victims. I want to know in what ways are victims of human trafficking in Botswana, in what ways are they compensated? Thank you.
So can the two speakers reply briefly, please?
Okay. On the aspect of interpreters in my country, I must say that there is always continuous training for interpreters. But the problem comes with, as I have indicated earlier on, that there's a large scale of immigration. And as it is, it's a meltdown of languages that are there. And for those languages that are not South African based, we rely on international interpreters. In as much as they are employed by the Department of Justice to come and give us language services in courts, as to their further training or whatever, I don't want to really put my 1 cent on it as to, to determine as to whether they're interpreting properly or not. Remember, our law allows for anyone can be sworn in as an interpreter in court. Even for just explanation of the rights of a person, you find that your local interpreter cannot understand the language for you to even start with the first process of explanation of legal representation and all those things. And as such, we rely sometimes on even the family members to help to explain the rights in order to kickstart, the case and all, because you do not want to infringe on their rights. A first appearance is very important and all that. And as such, you do not know, even yourself, as to whether this person is saying the right things or not. You have to learn other languages yourself, like I have to learn other languages not as part of the department. And but for those who are local, in terms of local languages, I know Justice College is doing continuous training on that. But for foreign language, that's where the problem is, unfortunately.
Thank you very much for the question. With compensation, it comes in two ways. There is compensation where the accused person has been convicted and the victim is given opportunity after conviction to apply for compensation. This could be for damages, if any, psychological, emotional damage, or wages that were not paid during the exploitation. And then there is another compensation where there is no perpetrator, but the victim has suffered damage.